All right, take a look at Pasuk 876.
876.
So, where is this over here? Okay, a very interesting concept over here coming up. On page 876, 4 lines from the bottom. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor. Tzoror esa midyonim. Tzoror means harass, torment. The Midianites, v'hikisa mosam, and you shall smite them. Now over here is not the actual command of what do you call it? It's not the actual command of what do you call it? Of fighting the Midianites. It's the command to eventually fight them. Not to actually come. Everybody should take a chumash. You can sit right over here. Take a chumash, make yourself comfortable. It's not the actual command to fight the Midianites, it's the command that later on you will be fighting them. But the Jewish people are informed about this now because the Midianites had just caused them a tremendous amount of loss because the girls had gone and gotten them in trouble. That's why there was the plague. So God is letting them know now that there will be a day of reckoning with the Midianites. And it says, Kitzorim heim lachem. Why is that? Kitzorim heim lachem, because they harassed you. B'nichleim asher niklu lachem al dvar pa'or, v'al dvar kozbi basur midyon achosam hamuka b'yom ha'magef al dvar pa'or. So God gives the command over here. He says, you are going to go and you are going to fight the Midianites. Now, the Torah does something over here which is strange. It says, tzoror es Midianim. First it says, harass them, and then it says, you're going to wipe them out. Page 876. So the question here is, what does it mean to harass them? When you wipe people out, it could be you got to be turned down lower. I think everybody's cold. Are you guys cold? Is it still cold in here? Yeah, look at that. All right, the cold is a little bit of cold. I'll leave it in the meantime. As people come in, it'll warm up. So tzoror means to harass them, and then it says, and then wipe them out. Now, I mean, that's so what does tzoror mean? What does it mean, tzoror? So there are different opinions over here. And again, the war doesn't take place now. The war is only going to be taking place later. So there's one opinion. One opinion is that tzoror means to, whereas other nations, the Jewish people, when they first, one opinion is that walk past them and flash your swords, right? Just show them that intimidate them a little bit. But there's a commentary here that says that this is fundamental and everybody should internalize this. This is extremely, extremely important because this is a fundamental in Yiddishkeit. When the Jewish people fought wars in general, there was a halacha that when they fought their enemies, they left a fourth flank open. Now there are different opinions why you do that. There's one opinion is because we fight a war and as Jews, even a war, we fight compassionately. That means you surround the enemies on 3 sides and you leave them the option to stay alive and escape, to run away, to flee. And you see that the world expects us, when you have problems in Gaza or in Jenin or in all these other hotbeds of terrorist activity, the Jewish soldiers, they go in there and they fight. They have to make sure not to hurt civilians and all the. Could you imagine Putin if somebody would have shot a couple of missiles at Putin from a Russian city? Just imagine a Russian city shot missiles and they landed in Moscow. What Putin would do to that city. The place would look like a crater in 24 hours, right? There'd be nothing about women, children, nothing. The place would look like a crater. Yeah, the Israelis go and they go fight away. You got to be careful, make sure not casualties there. The United Nations, all of a sudden, they're up in arms because there are a few casualties, a couple of civilians who probably were no tzatskalas either, and a couple of civilians got killed. So all of a sudden, the United Nations, and what the Russians are doing in Ukraine, that nobody says boo. So the Jews are always held to a very high exacting standard, and even when they went to war, you had to leave a flank open because we fight war compassionately. Let them. That's one opinion. There's another opinion that says to the contrary, it works in your advantage, because when you leave a fourth flank open, psychologically, people always feel, well, if I really have to, I could escape. It takes some of the fight out of them. Whereas if you surround people on 4 sides, So, they go, listen, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to take as many of them with me as I can, because anyway I'm going. Right? So they fight to the finish, and it puts more fight into them. So different approaches how that fight works. Here, the Jewish people are told, Sororis Abidyanim, here there's no compassion at all. You're going to surround them on all four sides. When you go to fight them, you will surround on all four sides because you're going to demolish them completely. That's the basic idea. This idea of leaving a flank open is a fundamental in interpersonal relationships, and particularly for Baalei Tshuva. That means that, first of all, when dealing with other people, all of you have friends who are discussing Yiddishkeit with you, and then you might even have a philosophical conversation with them after doing a couple of mushrooms. You'll have a philosophical conversation with them, and at a certain point, people are, they start talking drivel. All sorts of. A guy once said to me, how do you know it was God who held the mountain over the Jewish people? Maybe it was an outer space creature who held the mountain over the Jewish people. So I said to the guy, look, even if it was an outer space creature, it doesn't do you any good, because if he could hold a mountain over you, you got to do what he says anyway. So what do you gain by making it, instead of God, it's an outer space creature, right? Number two, I got nonsense that you talk outer space creatures, in all sorts of arguments, the religious are like this, and that's not true, and you can destroy their arguments. It's never ever a good idea to destroy a person. Always leave somebody a fourth flank. Let a person save face, as the expression goes. Because especially if you're trying to draw people closer to Yiddishkeit, it's more important that the experience that they have should not be an unpleasant thing. Let's say you're right. Let's say you cream somebody you demolish somebody in a religious argument. Let's say you destroy him totally. So what happens? He walks away from you. All he's thinking about is, I met a religious person and I had an unpleasant experience. So what did you gain? So that's certainly not going to draw him near. So you're right. You're 100% right. You've got truth on your side. But the fact that you have truth on your side is never a reason to completely shmetter somebody, because all that you're going to do is you're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't understand that expression, and I never have, but that's what people use. Throw out the baby with the bathwater. So what you're doing is, you may win the battle, but you lose the war. David, there should be chumash. You got a chumash? Good. Okay, we're at page 876. So that's a rule in life in general. This is also something that, believe it or not, I always advise wives. Don't surround your husband on four sides. Leave a flank open. When women are arguing, when wives and husbands are arguing, as soon as the husband starts raising his voice, that means he knows he's wrong. That's usually what it means. The louder he yells, the more wrong he is. And something, I am as serious as you could possibly be.
You tell her to stop. Let's just say you tell her to stop. You respect the boundary, and she doesn't respect the boundary. She breaks the boundary.
The rule is, if she's breaking the boundary, you've broken a dozen yourself. The approach is it takes, what do you call it? If the rule in marriage is, if you treat her well, she'll treat you well. That's the rule in marriage. If she's not happy, that means you're not treating her properly. And by the way, this is on film. So even my wife could see this, right? Don't ever tell her I said so. She doesn't watch these. But the what do you call it? If you do, I'll deny it and I'll sue you for slander. But the rule is, if I see a man who's happy, if I see a married man happy, that means he's treating his wife well. You know how I know? Because it means she's happy. And if she's happy, that's why he's happy. And if she's unhappy, it means he's not going to be happy, because it means he's not treating her well, if you can follow that logic. But what I'm telling you is 100% true, and you should pay me for this advice, priceless advice. And you can make out the checks to Kaplan, with Kaplan, Kaplan with a capital K. And so a wife who is wise, because obviously the women, a husband, she's calling you out on something. So a wife always they say a smart wife is that when she comes up with a great idea, she convinces her husband that it was his idea. That's a smart wife, because men have an ego, and men are immature, and men are babies, and men have trouble admitting to the truth, and so on and so forth. And therefore, in an interpersonal relationship, if you want to maintain, always leave a person and escape. Oh, I didn't mean that. It doesn't taste. I meant not good in a good way. Something, whatever double talk it's going to be. At the end of the day, always leave a person a flank of escape. That's as far as interpersonal relations, but it applies to a person in their approach to Yiddishkeit as well. Because sometimes a person who's coming to Judaism a little later in life decides, I can't, I don't want to make any mistakes, and I got to do everything perfect. He takes on every single halacha, every single mitzvah, and what a person does is he chokes himself off completely. And at a certain point, a person says, I can't take it anymore, and he just breaks it and he just leaves the entire thing. Person has to know you have to have somebody to guide you. Maybe you've bit off more than you can chew. It's a big Judaism out there. It's a big Torah out there. There are a lot of things that have to be done. There are a lot of mitzvahs. You didn't grow up with it. It's not your fault. God doesn't expect more of you than you're possibly capable of, and therefore a person has to make sure that they have guidance. Should I take this mitzvah on? Should I do this? Should I take on this? You have to take it on slowly. Sometimes guys embrace Judaism. Also, they throw out their entire life is thrown away. They disregard everything. Who could survive that? Let's say you're into art or you're into music. Who says you shouldn't continue with that? There are different rules and different guidelines. One of the most common questions I ask is people ask about, what about Goyish music? What should I do about Goyish music? That's a common question. You're not eating Goyish cheeseburgers anymore, and you're not chasing Goyish girls anymore, and you're not doing Goyish things like, maybe this is something that you should stick with in the meantime because it's too much, otherwise you're going to drown. A person could drown. A person has to be very, very careful over here. Is it prohibited? So if it's a woman singing, it's a problem. And if the lyrics are suggestive, well, there goes Goyish music. But the way to go, but you have to know, each person has to, there's a level. A person has to know. He has to be very, very careful about what they take on. Sometimes, for example, somebody asked me recently about davening. Somebody who's never davened wants to know about davening. You have to daven the whole davening every morning. So a guy in the early stages, you don't have to daven the whole davening, and if you do, you're going to feel overwhelmed. It's just too much. And then there comes the stringencies, which we spoke about. Taking on, who told you to be stringent? Who told you to do that? Who told you to do more than you're required to do or more than you're capable of doing? And therefore, it's a very important. By the way, on Purim, I don't know if you've ever seen what Purim looks like in religious communities. You see guys getting drunk on Purim, right? Okay, so yes, I'm talking about people. I'm talking about people who don't get drunk the rest of the day. I'm not talking about I'm talking about college campus. I'm talking about Purim for those who don't drink the rest of the year. I had a guy told me his roommate in college was such an alcoholic. The guy once told me, he said his roommate had beer everywhere he went. He had a beer. He had beer in the car. He had beer by his bed. He had beer everywhere he went. And even in the morning when he ate Cheerios, he ate Cheerios with beer instead of with milk. That's the way to go. So, see, a guy like that gets drunk on Purim. Every day's Purim for him. It's not. I'm talking about the people who don't. Okay, there's certain men in the religious community. We don't get drunk. We don't get drunk. We drink a little bit of wine on Shabbos, then a little bit more. And but we don't nobody gets nobody gets like Purim drunk. You drink a little bit of wine, you feel happy, that sort of thing. And then Purim comes along. For many people, Purim is their fourth flank.
Is it fourth what?
The open fourth flank that we're talking about. If Purim is that means that, especially if you come from a colorful background and you're used to that sort of thing and you're trying to get away from it, but one day a year, psychologically, one day a year, I could be, quote unquote, a little naughtier with limitations. I could be naughty with limitations. And for a yeshiva guy, or guys, imagine a guy who's raised in a very, very rigid, frum, strict environment, and then there's one day of year where you get to let go. But even that's with limitations. Even that's with limitations. There's certain lines that you're doing now, like nothing immoral, nothing lewd, nothing off color. It's got to be with limitations. If you're going to break those limitations, then you shouldn't do it at all. But each person has to know where his release is. Where a person who said, if you're a guy who's into exercise, who said you should become firm? You should stop exercising. Who says you should become? It could be life-threatening. A guy eats chomp. You better do exercise at some time during the week. That's potent stuff. If a guy's into art, who says you should stop drawing? If a guy plays guitar, who said you should stop playing? Guys drop these things like, oh, who told you to do that? No, I only speak Aramaic. Who told you you have to do that? Where did you get that? Where did you get that idea from? Like all of a sudden you're going by your Hebrew name, and your name is, your English name is Tony, and your Hebrew name is Kalman Zalman Schnitzel, and you come on to everybody, and that's what everybody's got to call you. And they come in people. And by the way, it causes a tremendous amount of animosity with parents. Parents who are anyway, parents who are visioning. Did you ever see the movie Annie Hall with Woody Allen? There's a picture with Woody Allen is this Jewish guy, and you know what Woody Allen looked like with his just disheveled hair, and he's dating this waspy girl, and he's sitting at the table with her parents and her grandmother looks at him, and she sees this Hasidic guy. He's wearing a shtreimel and payas and everything else. That's what she sees in the Jew. Like the Jew, Woody Allen, who doesn't look very Jewish, and she sees him with a shtreimel. It's a brilliant shot. But you should know that often parents, that's what they're looking at also. My son, the Baal Tshuva, next thing you know, he's going to be wearing a shtreimel, with payas. That's what they're, the dread fear. Anything's better than that. And so who told you to do it? And who told you to put that limitation on yourself? That's what the Torah is talking about here. The Torah is saying, you know what, leave the fourth flank open. Leave yourself, you need an outlet. Everybody needs an outlet. Everybody has to have some sort of outlet in life. So if you were seventh generation in Bnei Brak, so your outlet is that you learn Chumash sometimes. Most of the time you learn Gemara, and sometimes you learn Chumash, right? Okay, that's if you're seventh generation Bnei Brak. But if you're a guy who first discovered Yiddishkeit, we all came to Yiddishkeit a little bit later. So you had whatever your outlets were, as long as they're not illegal and as long as they're not against halacha. It's not against halacha and it's not illegal, you're allowed to do it. Right? Pasuk 876, Pasuk Yudches. 3 lines from the bottom. 4 lines from the bottom. Tzorah es hamidyonim. Okay, let's go on. Now, the next section, the Torah is going to start counting the Jewish people again. And the reason they count the Jewish people, that's why the book of Bamidbar is called the Book of Numbers, because Bamidbar is called the Book of Numbers because of what do you call it? Because they're constantly counting the Jewish people. Now, if you take a look in Pasuk Yud Aleph, I'm not going to go through all these psukim, but it starts going through the various families. And then if you take a look on page 878, 5 lines from the bottom, it goes through the sons of Ruvain, and then it talks about Dasan and Aviram again. It mentions them. Dasan and Aviram, who are the villains. And then it says, on plus 5 lines from the bottom, what happened to Dasan and Aviram? The Torah again repeats it. Vatiftach ha'aretz espiha. The land, the earth, opened its mouth. 878, 5 lines from the bottom. Vativla osam, the earth swallowed them. Ve'es korach b'mosa eda, and it swallowed them, and korach. Ba'chola eshes chamishim u'masayim ish vayulanes. When the fire consumed the 250 people, and they became how does he translate? A sign, a symbol. That means they're a reminder to us for all future generations. And then it says, Uvenei Korach lo mesa, the sons of Korach did not die. So there are different opinions that the sons of Korach, who were being influenced by their father, who was the ultimate rebel, and yet at the last minute they moved away. They said, we're not joining this rebellion, and therefore they didn't die. Now there are different opinions exactly what happened to them. There's a very esoteric idea that a platform opened up for them in Gehenna, and they sat on that platform. Whatever that means, I don't know what that means. It's some sort of, I don't know, because Gehenna is a spiritual thing. I don't understand that exactly what that means. Whatever it is, could be at a deeper level. It just means that there was some deflection, that they ended up not going into Gehenna because they did tshuva. I'm not sure what that means. But I saw one in the commentary, it says tongue-in-cheek, but it's not so tongue-in-cheek. It says, Uvenei Korach lo mesa, the sons of Korach never died. Now, you know that the Gemara says that a person who has disciples, Torah disciples are referred to as your children. So the Gemara says if somebody teaches Torah to somebody else, it's as if he's born him. So the Gemara says. So it says, Uvenei Korach lo mesu. Korach's children never died. That means Korach's disciples never died. That means in every generation there are Korachs. In every community, in every shul, Korach, there will always be those who carry on Korach's legacy. You're always going to have those guys in shul who are going to be the Korachs, the guys who are the miserable people in the community who are always starting trouble when there's trouble to start, or even when there's no trouble to start, they're always starting trouble. You always got these guys in every shul. A famous rabbi of a shul once said, a congregational rabbi, he once said, in every shul, 90% of the people in the shul are totally apathetic. 5% of the people love the rabbi. They'll do anything for the rabbi. They'll die for the rabbi. Then you got 5% of the people always hate the rabbi. 5% of the people are against the rabbi. Those are the korachs, right? And you got them in every building. You got them in every apartment complex. If you guys ever lived in I used to live in an apartment complex. In every apartment complex, there's always that one guy. Everybody wants to paint the stairwell. There's always the one guy who doesn't want to. Right? There's always that one guy if you live in that sort of situation. There's always that one guy, no matter what everybody wants to do, he wants to do the opposite. There's always that one guy who never gets along with anybody. He's always the guy switching shuls. He's already on his fourth shul, right? Because he couldn't stand the people in the first shul, couldn't stand the rabbi in the second shul, couldn't stand everybody in the third shul. Now he's in the fourth shul till eventually he moves and he runs out of shuls. There's always, so that's what it says, uvenei korach lo mesa. There's always going to be that rabble rouser. Now, if you take a look at in Pasuk Tes Zayin. So now we're going to examine a few names. So it's the second line from the top on page 880. It just shows you the depth of the Torah, what's in a name. So the Gemara asks the following question. The Gemara says, why is it that fingers are pointed like, what's it called? Not a spade, what's something a stake, a stake. Did you say a stake? The fingers are wider at the bottom and they become narrower at the top. And I always wondered about it because my fingers are pretty straight, but they're also registered with the police, by the way. These hands were registered with the police. Yeah, I got caught for shoplifting. If you look at a baby's fingers, it's more pronounced. Look at a little baby. The baby's right at the base. It's very thick. Baby's fingers almost look like a triangle. At the base, they're very thick, and then they narrow towards the top. So Gemara says, why are your fingers thicker and they narrow towards the top? So Gemara says, because if somebody is speaking Lashon Hara, you stick your fingers in your ears. And if nothing else works to get people around you to stop gossiping and speaking negative about it, disparaging other people, stick your fingers in your ears. Then they'll get the hint. That's what the Gemara says. That's why the fingers they're made to go into the ears, not into the other guy's ears, into your own ears. Right? That's what the fingers are for. And by the way, people ask all the time, how do I avoid, if somebody is speaking Lashon, how do you tell people not to? Ever been in that situation? Somebody's about to speak bad about other people, or is already speaking bad. You'd like to tell them not to. What's the most tactful way to do it? To stick your fingers in your ears is a fallback position, especially if you're sitting at a Shabbos table and there's a little gossip going on. Don't do it. Get up and walk away if you have to. Go into a coughing fit and go into the other room or something. Don't stick your fingers in your ears. But the Gemara says, if all else fails, stick your fingers in your ears. The Gemara also says that's why we have lobes. Why the lobes hang loose, for those who have loose lobes. There are two types of lobes, right? The lobes are a bit loose. Yeah, now everybody's checking their lobes. Yeah, you all got them, right? Now, why do you have lobes? So that you could push them over like this and plug your ears so you don't hear Lashon Hara. That's what the Gemara says, okay? The tactful way, if you're ever in a situation, is blame yourself. If somebody starts talking to you about other people, so you just say something like, oh, listen, I've been very loose with them. I've been talking too much about people. Maybe we can change the subject. If you blame yourself, you ever notice people are always willing to let you blame yourself. If you say to the other guy, hey, stop, that's Lashon Hara, you sinner, right? Now, that doesn't go over well, right? People don't like being criticized. But if you blame yourself, people are more than happy to allow you to blame yourself. The Gemara says, if nothing else works, you put your fingers in your ears. Now, take a look at the Bnei Gad. 880, 2 lines from the top. Bnei Gad lemishpachosam litzfon mishpachas atzfoni lechagi mishpachas achagi leshuni mishpachas ashuni. Then it says leozni mishpachas haozni le'eri mishpachas ha'eri. Now, if you look at Rashi points out, top line, right column. If you find it, please show the person next to you. Who is this ozni? Rashi says, Omer ani shazu mishpachas etzbon. There's a family called Etzbon, and in this pasuk they're referred to as Ozni. Ve'eni yodea lama lo nikres mishpachto al shmo. That means originally this family was called Etzbon, and they're now long. They're no longer around, and now somehow we've switched into Ozni. So one of the classic commentaries, the Shlah, he says, what is a finger called in Hebrew? Anybody know what's a finger called in Hebrew? Anybody say it? Somebody said it? An etzba. And what's an ear called? Ozen. Good. So if you take a look in the pasuk refers to him as Ozni, and his original name was Etzbon, right? So it's an allusion to the idea of the finger going into the etzba going into the ozen. That idea of plugging your ears. The question becomes, what's it got to do with this over here? Why is this over here, the Uzdi and Etzbon over here? So one of the commentaries suggests, well, this is the tribe of Gad. This is a family in the tribe of Gad. Now, you know the Jewish people were divided into 4 units. One of the units was Ruvain, Shimon, and Gad. That was one of the units. That was one of the flanks. Well, who came from the tribe of Ruvain? Dasan and Aviram. Who came from the tribe of Shimon? That no good Zimri who got involved with the Midianite girl. So there were members of the tribe of Gad who, you know, when you're a troublemaker, you're generally trying to spread the trouble to other people. So Dasan and Aviram certainly tried to get other people involved in there. They're the neighbors, Dasan and Aviram. And then you got Zimri, who's also trying to spread the negative. So what is the reaction of this family? This family, Etzbon, Uzni, their family was to put their reaction was to put their fingers in their ears to not hear any of these negative ideas that are coming from their neighbors, Dasan and Aviram and Zimri, and therefore the Torah alludes to it over here. That's what one of the commentaries points out. Okay. Take a look at Pasuk Chaf Dalid. Chaf Gimel. B'nei Yisachar. Now here is a very big discussion. How do you pronounce it? Anybody here's name? First of all, can we make it a little colder? Where's Moshe? Yeah, somebody turned it down. I thought it would get warm. Anybody here named Yisachar? Nobody named Yisachar. Okay, so look at the word. It's the about 14 lines from the top. Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Thank you, Aryeh. B'nei Yisachar lemishpechosam. Now, how would you read that if it didn't have vowels? Yisachar. Yisachar. There are 2 shins over there. B'nei Yisachar. Now, there's a whole discussion here. How do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it Yisachar or you pronounce it Yisachar? Because most Yisachars that I know are pronounced Yisachar. Right. Even though, if you read the letters, it's Yisachar. And there's a whole discussion among the commentaries of what is the correct pronunciation. Not only that, there's some who even write it without the second shin. They even write it Yud Shin Chaf Resh instead of the second one. And their family goes through the family of Yisachar. Now, why is it that there's a silent shin over here? So take a look at Rashi. We have to read the next pasuk. Liyoshuv mishpachas hayoshuvi, l'shimron mishpachas hashimruni. Everybody see where that is? We're on page 880. Page 880, pasuk Gimel, right in the middle of the page. So you have Yisachar, or Yisachar, and then you have Yoshuv. Now take a look at Rashi. Right column, second line from the top. Li Yoshuv. Says Rashi, Hu Yov. This Yoshuv is really a man named Yov, ha'omor b'yordei Mitzrayim, where it mentions him originally when the Jewish people went down to Egypt. And then he says that this Yov, if you take a look on the next page, does Rashi mention it? I'm mixing Rashi up with one of the commentaries. Yeah, Rashi doesn't say it. One of the commentaries says, okay, so now look at that. Get a little technical, gentlemen, but take a look. Look at the word Yisachar, and look at the word Yoshuv on the next line. Li Yoshuv. Rashi says that this man Yoshuv, his real name is Yov. How do you get to Yov from Yashuv? Take out a shin. Take out a shin from Yashuv and you'd get Yov, Yud Vav Beis. You see that? You see that? Look at that word. Does everybody see? Are you with me? And Pasuk 24, is everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay? So if you have that word, here, where's the what do you call it? I'm hooked up. Okay. You have the word, you have Yisachar. Yeah. You have Yisachar. And you have Yashuv, his son. He's mentioned as a son of Yisachar. But the first time he's mentioned as Yov. There is no shin the first time he's mentioned. In here, his name turns into Yashuv. Now, where did this shin come from? Where did this shin come from? All of a sudden he's got a shin. And why does he have a shin? So the commentaries point out there was an idol worship, a form of idol worship called Yov. But that idol only came into being after he was born. So his father named him Yov. It's like naming a kid Buddha. Right? You named your kid Buddha. It's a nice name. Till it ends up as a form of idol worship. Right? So you get that little, I call you Buddha's the little fat guy who can't afford a shirt. Right? And he's, right? So you named the kid Buddha, and then years later, there's an idol named Buddha. Well, I don't want to call my kid by an idol. I'm just using it as an example. So we'll add a name. We'll add a letter to his name. So put in an R. So we'll call him Bruda from now on, instead of Buddha, because I want to change it. But this Yov had a name named Yov, but Yov eventually became the name of an idol. So his father added a shin to his name, and he becomes Yashuv. But where did that shin come from? Yisachar. Exactly. And that's why that shin is not pronounced. It's a silent shin because the father gave, so to speak, he gave a shin to his son. Now, what does that mean? I mean, you gave a letter to your son. I mean, what does that mean? First of all, the name Yisachar, by the way, if you take a look, breaks into two. The name Yisachar breaks into two words, which is Yesh, Sachar. What's Sachar? Reward. Yesh, Sachar. And the ultimate reward, which is the biggest mitzvah that a Jewish man could do?
Learn Torah.
Learn Torah. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. What did the tribe of Yisachar do? They were the ones who studied Torah.
Was it the tribe of Levi?
The tribe of Levi also, but primarily the tribe of Yisachar. They were the Torah studiers, and their brother Zevulun supported them. Like they were a whole question. They were the original Kolo people. So the name Yisachar, where they were the ones who studied Torah, which is the ultimate mitzvah, is Yesh Sachar. But even more than that, the Gemara says in the world to come, each person is going to have 310 worlds of reward waiting for him. Every tzaddik will have Shai Olamos, 310 worlds of reward, which means that Yisachar is Yesh Sachar, he's going to have reward, but how much reward will he have? Yud Shin, a Shin and a Yud is 310. So Yisachar is the reward, the Torah learning. That's the Yisachar. Now, at the end of the day, he gave a shin to his son. What does that mean? What does that mean? So we know that your name, you know, you have a neshama. Everybody has a neshama. What are the two middle letters of neshama? Shin mem, which spells what? Shame. Your name. That means a name is a description of who you are. A name is a description. A name is not just, the name is a description of your essence. It's the two middle letters of the Shema is a description of your essence. That means when parents name their children at the bris, our tradition is that the parents are, at that moment, they're experiencing some sort of what we call Ruach HaKodesh. They don't know it, but they've got some sort of Ruach HaKodesh at the bris that they have divinely inspired to give a name, because that name is a description of a neshama, whatever that means. I don't know exactly what that means about you, but your name is a description of your neshama. Here you have the father, Yisachar, who is symbolically giving some of his neshama, some of his essence to his son, because he doesn't want his son named after an idol worship. And obviously the lesson is a father has to be fully devoted to his children. A father brings children into the world, you have a job. Your job is to give yourself to your children. Your children are an extension of yourself. We live in a selfish world where obviously people want as few children, people don't want a lot of children because children take up time, and children take up your neshama, and children take out your kishkis, right? And that's before they're teenagers, right? And when they're teenagers, it gets worse. There's an expression in Yiddish. I don't know Yiddish, but it sounds, in Yiddish, they say when they're little, they step on your toes. When they get older, they step on your heart, right? And in Yiddish, it's really nasty sounding, you know, and it's true. And then they become teenagers, you know. But that's what parents are for. Parents are fully devoted. That's why people wonder about the, you know, in the religious world, family size tends to be a little bit different than in the rest of the world. You know, in the rest of the world, if you have 4 kids, that's a big family. And in the Jewish, in the religious world, if you have 4 kids, that means you've been married for 5 years. Right? That's the what do you call it? I know one family, they had twins, a regular, and then twins in the first 3 years. They had 5 kids under 3 years old. Yeah, they were trying to invent an automatic diaper changer. You know, you put the kid in one end of the machine, it just comes out changed. At the other end, like a bread maker. You know, you put it. You know, that's right. I knew another family that they had twins, then a regular, then triplets in 4 years. So they had 6 kids under 4 years old. Right? There's a family in Arzea over here that has either 19 or 17. I'm not sure.
Kids?
What?
17 kids?
Kids, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
What's the record for a Frum family?
The record for a Frum family depends, because at the time of the desert, they were having 6 at each birth. So it could be, you know, you had a small family, was only 24, and you could have had a bigger family of about 120. I know in Israel there was actually a family that has I'm talking about one husband, one wife that I think they have 22. There's one family that has one husband, one that has 22 kids. Now, yeah, they're not a family, they're a tribe. But so I want to tell you, I have my upstairs neighbor had 9 sons. Yeah, and 7 daughters.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I want to tell you something. My kids used to play with their kids. Their kids are 100% normal, adjusted, stable, social, everything else. So people always wonder, well, you know, so if I ask you, what's the perfect number? What is the perfect number of kids? Most people, the guy says 3. Sure, he probably comes from a family of 3 kids. And somebody says, well, 5. I would assume he comes from a family of 5 kids. So what's the perfect number? So people say, well, if you have so many kids, how can you give them enough attention, right? That's the obvious question. Well, I got news for you. Once you have 1 kid, when you have a second child, so you already by definition can't give the first one as much attention, right? So maybe you should stop there. And if you have 3 kids and you have a 4th one, so how do you do it? The answer is it has nothing to do with the number of children. It has to do with the attitude of the parents. If you're living for yourself, then 3 kids is overwhelming. 3 kids is too much. 1 kid is too much. If you're living for yourself, 1 kid will feel that he is not getting his parents totally. If you're living for your kids, so then every one of them feels like he's an only child. So it has to do with the attitude of the parents. They asked the mother who had 12 kids, they said to her, how do you divide your love among so many kids? She said, I don't divide, I multiply. Right? And that's the truth, that's the attitude. So obviously for people who come from small families, like, whoa, yeah, every one of those 16 kids felt like an only child. I know these kids, they grew up in my building. Every one of the kids feels like an only child. It has to do, it's an attitude and an approach to life. And in a world where people want to live for themselves, you know, at the end of the day, I can tell you from personal experience, when we had probably the most difficult adjustment, when you have 1 kid, you're overwhelmed. The first kid, you're overwhelmed. Parents don't know what hit them. Right? I remember we had our first kid, my rabbi said to me, he's going to change your life in ways you can't imagine. Right? And they do. Right? You can't, you know, I never thought I'd be able to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning 3 nights in a row. They have to wake up my wife to take care of the kid. You know, it's not so easy, you know. And I like to sleep straight. Hey, lady, your baby's crying. You know, no, you're laughing. You're going to do it, and you're going to get up. And that's, by the way, a test of your character when you're up in the middle of the night and you're falling off your feet. The baby's he's colicky, and he's cranky, and he's crying. He could cry 15 out of 24 hours, sometimes 20. He's a baby mouth. The baby's the stomach digestive system. And you're going to get up, and you're going to do it, and you're going to change. You know, when I was going out with my wife, I said to her, by the way, I don't do diapers. She said to me, I don't either, now what? I did them I did them, boys, right? Like you're going to do them too. That's right. And you're going to pick them up and you're going to burp them and you're going to do everything and you're going to feed them. I got a video of me feeding my 2-year-old at 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning, kid got up, he's hungry. He doesn't have to get up and go to work the next day. What does he care? And I got a video of me feeding him a corn patty at 2 in the morning, right? And they're on their own schedule. When one kid comes, you don't know what hit you. When a second one comes along, depending on how close they are in age. But if it comes within about a year and a half, then at that point that's the hardest adjustment because one of them, somebody is always crying, either the baby or the other baby or you, right? Somebody's always somebody at that point. And it's inevitable. You get up with one of them, you put them down. Your wife's falling off her feet because she's already, you put them down, you go back to sleep, put your head on the pillow. The other one starts, and there's that sound, and you got to get up. That's the way it is. That's how Kodesh Baruch Hu, God made them that way in order that we should give and invest ourselves into our kids. By the time the third one comes along, it's a little easier because you're already used to the fact that you have no life. And by the time the fourth or fifth one comes along, it's much easier. I can tell you that when we had 1, 2, or 3, my wife and I could never take a Shabbos nap in the afternoon at the same time. Somebody had to be on duty with the kids. By the time you get to the fourth or fifth one, it's not a problem because the older 1, 2, 3, and 4, they play with number 5. You come out, where's the baby? There he is. No, there he is. There, kind of tossing him back and forth. That's fine. Dragging him across the floor. He's having a great time. He's got more attention than anybody. He got attention from all his older siblings. So I knew a guy. By the way, I knew a guy who had 10 daughters. He had 10 straight daughters, and then the 11th one was a boy. Right? This guy was walking the streets. It doesn't matter who he saw. Friend, neighbors, Arabs. It didn't matter. This guy, I had a boy. I had a boy. It was just, what do you call it? It was unbelievable. Right? It didn't matter. He's walking. So it's all part of the fun. You don't even notice it. There was I heard about one frum lady. A lady became a Balas Tshuva. And by the way, a frum woman, theoretically, a woman who gives birth. Think about this, gentlemen. This'll make it Yasein Shalo Asani Isha with Kavana. Think about the fact that you could go about 9 months, 10 months, a year and a half, without ever getting more than 2 hours sleep at a stretch. Think about that. Yeah, a nursing mother. Yeah, listen, she's on the baby schedule, right? And then there's her husband, who's the bigger baby. Right? She's on the baby schedule. Think about that. You may as well go to the Navy SEALs because that's what they got to do. Think about that. So I heard about this woman who's a Balas Tshuva. She gets married, and they don't practice birth. They just have one kid after the other. They got about 7 kids. Her mother is the cynical mother who's anti everything that her daughter's ever done. And she comes for a visit, and there's the daughter. She's got 7 kids, and she's in her 7th month. She's expecting another one. And her mother comes into the house, she looks at him and she says, well, you need another one? Her daughter did. She called out all the kids and she lined them up. She said, Mom, you're absolutely right. Which one shouldn't we have had? Never heard another word about it. And by the way, that's the great equalizer. For Bali Tshuvas, whose parents are giving you a hard time, they melt when you have grandchildren. In most cases. People become crazy when they have grandchildren. Because the grandchildren they like. They know, right? The grandchildren they like. And I've seen this where the parents are not religious, the kids became religious, the grandchildren are now being raised religious, and the grandparents will take the kids and say, no, you can't have that, that's not kosher. They'll be more concerned because that's the kid, the grandchildren they like. The grandchildren they care. I'm telling you, it's over and over. And that's what happens. That's the truth. So it's not easy. But it's not easy nothing. You could have 2 kids and they could give you more aggravation than 15 kids put together. That's all. What's the perfect number? So we decide the perfect number is whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives. There are certain times where a couple could practice birth control if there's a health threat to a woman's health is threatened. Under certain circumstances, financial pressure, but that requires a major halachic authority to be involved in order to grant any sort of permits, any sort of heter to practice birth control. Otherwise, we do like everything else. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and you see that the religious families, they seem to be doing very well. They're very happy. Maybe financially things are a little hard, but the other people have other difficulties in life. So you could have one person who, you have one person has 2 kids, and one of the kids becomes a drug addict, and the other kid becomes who knows what happens, ends up in jail or whatever it is. You have as much aggravation from 2 kids, more aggravation than you ever have from 3. And then down the line, as the person gets a little older and you have your kids and you have your family, then you realize that's what it's all about anyway, because at the end of the day, you got nothing else anyway. And there are plenty of, I remember when my bubby was in the hospital, it was in an old age home, and she had 5 kids, and each one of her kids had a lot of kids, and constantly grandchildren are coming, children are coming, and the lady in the next bed, it doesn't have anybody, she never had anybody, doesn't have anybody, she's left with nothing. Absolutely nothing. So the Torah is telling over here that a father has to give everything to his child. Father gives everything for his son. That's the job of the father. You have to give everything to your wife. That's your responsibility. And your family is your responsibility. That's the Bnei Yisachar. Okay. Very quickly. Well, all right, we're out. So we'll continue tomorrow, Hashem.